Good evening, everybody. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday again. And you know what that means. You're here, you know what that means. It's time for another episode of Cello Chat. Very excited, extremely excited to have as a guest this evening, Matthew Wiest. Matthew, it's always great to see you. How have you been?
Well, likewise, it's always great to see you as well. I've been good. Absolutely, crazy busy, but good nonetheless. So, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Tremendous. Oh, my pleasure entirely. So I'm dying to ask about your recent recital, but first things first, would you explain to the viewer kind of just your musical background, how you got started, and where you are now?
Sure. Yeah. So I've most of my life, I can say, I've been playing the cello, either playing the cello or been exposed to elements of classical music. Really going back to my early years, I was exposed to classical music, so naturally picked up and developed an interest for it. I had my first cello when I was the age of 3. But that was more of a fun thing that I liked to do here and there. It was kind of like how, kids play with toys, they get excited about it and then, they leave them for a while and then come back at another time. I didn't actually find myself, having that desire to study with a teacher and get better at the cello. It was more just a fun thing I wanted to do. So it was around, I believe it was the summer after my first grade year that I picked it back up, and with more of this seriousness, I guess. And yeah, I've been going ever since. So I should note that I come from a musical family as well. Both of my parents are not only musicians, fantastic musicians, but fantastic educators as well. So I feel very blessed, very lucky to have that in my life. And yeah, so I I've participated in multiple youth orchestras. Um, I uh, I've attended the University of Colorado Boulder for the past 4 years, and I'm actually coming up on graduation, which is very exciting. But yeah, I kind of sped through everything. I don't know if you have any specific questions, but bit of a synopsis. So
All right, well, terrific. Yeah, well, I do have some specific questions, but I first got to ask you, how did last Saturday go? Your senior recital?
yeah. Well, I'm pleased to say it. I was happy with it. I felt very good about it. It's always a lot of buildup that goes into these recitals, and I feel like I was able to take away a lot of positives from last year's recital, but also sort of learn from things that I could have done differently to better prepare myself. And I feel like I really put in the work and the appropriate amount of time to feel not only prepared, but in a sort of a headspace where I could truly enjoy the moment. Because it's very easy to forget that being such an important part of performing. And that was one thing that I wanted to make sure I could connect to in the performance, was just appreciating the music and being able to share the music with the wonderful support that I have in my life. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. For anyone who's wondering, the program consisted of the Lamentations suite by Coleridge Taylor Perkinson, an American composer, and a really fascinating piece, definitely outside of my comfort zone in terms of style. It's not what you would think of when it comes to classical music. It's actually very much inspired by blues music and a lot of more folk tunes, if you will. From sort of a southern background, and yeah, it was a super fun process to put this piece together. It is for solo cello, so I had a lot more freedom, if you will, to try different things, experiment with different things. I was very happy with how that went. Um, and that was on the first half. I followed that with some Latin American pieces. So kind of keeping it in the Americas for the first half. I played a piece by living composer, Jose Elizondo, I believe. And the piece is actually for cello duo. So there's two movements that I played, and both are based on or inspired by specific Latin American dances slash styles. One is Argentinian, the other is from Brazil. And yeah, that one was just, it came together really nicely. I thought my collaborator, Louis, is wonderful to work with. And then to finish the first half, I played a piece that is relatively popular. I would think a good amount of people would know about Oblivion, a piece written by Piazzolla. Really beautiful work. I found a version for cello quartet that really caught my attention, and I immediately wanted to play, and ended up doing a transcription of sorts for cello quartet because I could not find the part online for the best of me. And after that, that was the first half. And then on the second half, I played the Poulenc cello sonata, a sonata I wasn't familiar with, to be honest with you, before this year. I recently discovered it, and it's such a wonderful piece to sink your teeth into. It's just, again, out of my comfort zone, but it's not one of the standard works. Poulenc,
It's tricky.
yeah.
That Poulenc is tricky. Wow.
Yes, technically speaking, it's very difficult, and it's easy to sort of shy away from as a cellist. But I thought it was a great opportunity to learn the piece, and I actually performed it on my pianist's recital as well, who I had the pleasure of working with, Bobby Pace, incredible musician. And yeah, it's equally challenging for him as well. But overall, I was happy with how it went. I felt like I was able to communicate a lot of the things I've been working on. So yeah, overall a success for sure.
Superb, superb. Well, I'm very glad you were able to have fun. I mean, I think even with the best of intentions, sometimes the moment people walk out on stage, that sometimes can go by the wayside, and the audience can always tell if the person on the stage is really truly enjoying being out there, and they want them to. We all want that performer to. So that's great. All the more reason why I'm looking forward to getting to hear the recording. Now, past recitals of yours, people can find on YouTube. Are you going to upload this one on YouTube as well?
I plan to upload clips of it,
Okay.
if not movements from certain things. That is, something that I found difficult is posting things to YouTube or to any social media that I know will be seen by friends, and it's not too far from what the actual recital is. That the goal as a performer is to share these things with people who are interested in listening, and at the end of the day, that's really what's most important. But I do find myself second guessing, do I want to put this out there into a space where anyone could see it? That's always been difficult for me. So I don't think I posted any of my junior recital, but in retrospect, there are plenty of moments from that I'd love to share. I think I often just forego posting at all. So that's something that I'd like to feel more comfortable about heading into the future here, because it is a very valuable thing, I think, to just put yourself out there, no matter how you feel, because at the end of the day, it shouldn't make that much of a difference in this process.
Well, and if you afterwards, if you felt like you had fun and were effective in what you were trying to express artistically, if there's a little something here or there, the viewer will overlook it, just like the attendee did at last Saturday.
Sure.
We'll still be moved. So that's a good segue, though, for talking about one of the things I want to talk about a bit. Actually, for example, this summer, from mid third week of June, is our traditionally when our summer camp is, and that I've been director of since I took over the reins from your mom, Carmen. Yeah, it was sure great having her as a colleague those several years. What I guess 8 years. And so we started having a theme to our summer camp. And this year, the theme is health and wellness in string playing. And so, I mean, it's always interesting to watch how some people can play and be effective in a piece of music, but clearly are working hard, or have carry with them quite a bit of tension in some component of their playing. But in your playing, I mean, you have both a relaxed bow hold that you still, in other words, I would say that the lay or the casual cellist, the beginner cellist might look at your bow hold and think that looks so relaxed. He's just kind of like phoning it in or something like that. And then you'll zip to another part of the bow just like that. So you don't in any way, shape, or form feel like you have to have any particular tension in your bow hold in order to be the absolute master of where you want to be when for what articulation and what effect. So is there, to what or to whom do you credit your right hand technique?
Sure. So, I mean, that's a great question, and I think there's a lot of different things I could credit it to. But one thing I wanted to point out, just the language that you used, because often we get certain language confused. You said bow hold, which is very accurate because at the end of the day, I think that's what it is. We also hear bow grip. Mm-hmm. That's something that is tossed around a lot, which as a beginner could be compelling in the sense that, well, we got to grip onto this thing. We got to make it work. But I think over time, you'll learn that, that gripping actually becomes extremely limiting for the player in terms of being able to create certain colors, and really having control of the bow isn't about the grip. It's about this hold. And I think, I've learned that just over time in my own experience, but I've had the pleasure of working with wonderful teachers. Most recently, Professor Ricuro here at CU Boulder. He has a wonderful bow hold, and he's big on utilizing the index finger and leaning onto that, and that's an excellent tool, and I use it all the time. And but before studying with Professor Ricuro, I worked with Professor Zalkind over at DU. And I also love his bow hold. So between the both of them, I've gathered a lot of great ways to work on the bow hold. But that's always been something that I feel I feel like I've spent a good amount of time thinking about and working through, is creating this ease in the bow arm. And it does start with the grip, because it's, it communicates with the rest of your arm. And to feel unlocked, to feel loose in your bow hold will allow you to engage other parts of the body, which I think is easy to forget, is that we have these parts of the body that we can access while we play, while we're in this position. Even though we're seated, if we could stand up, that would open up a whole world of possibilities. So I am definitely envious of violinists and violists for being able to do that. But even sitting, there's so many muscles that we can access and we can utilize to feel more balanced and access for that power that we want. And the power, again, doesn't come from here. It comes from other places. So
Good.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I must say, I think that maybe one of the number one things that a lot of young cellists do is to, whether intentionally or not, seemingly put all of their efforts into their left hand technique, and the right hand just is good, but not as good as their left hand. So hats off to you for weighing in on the importance of. I mean, the right hand being truly our voice, and the sky's the limit as to how much that can help us get our message out there by giving more attention to what we're wanting to do with the right hand. But at the same time, you shift very comfortably and fearlessly, and good timing, good preparation of motion so that it doesn't, even fast shifts don't appear at all frantic. So what about thoughts on left hand technique?
Sure. So the first thing that comes to mind with my left hand is I've always felt like I'm able to hear things ahead of time, which I feel like is I feel very lucky that I've been able to do that naturally, because I've found it's very difficult to teach. But I will say, when I shift, I try to lead with my ears. I try to hear the note. I try to hear the sound that I'm going for before I even begin the shift, so that it all comes together as planned. And it's not a trying to be super calculated with the distance and how I'm going to get there, which is totally valid in the practice room. I guess this is more so for the moment, the performance. You want to lead with your ears. You want to have, Paul Katz talks about having massive elephant ears when you perform. And I think it's a great visual, because it's true, especially if you're performing with collaborators as well. You want to be outside of this, because that after a while is going to be extremely limiting. And I think having the ability to not only hear the pitch, but hear the sound that you want will help you to find that voice, and the shift will kind of it'll happen. It is easier said than done, of course, but I've found that to be the best way to feel comfortable while shifting.
Nice, nice. I like also that you differentiate. There is sometimes a distinct gear shift that we make between the strategies that we use in the practice room and our attitude on stage. That's another good point. All right. So now you, after graduating, now senior recital behind you and summer coming up, you have an exciting prospect starting this fall. You want to tell about that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm incredibly excited to announce that I will be attending the Eastman School of Music for my master's degree in cello performance, and I will be studying with professors Steven Doane and Rosemary Elliott as a teaching assistant. Both wonderful teachers, pedagogues, and I couldn't be more excited to get to work. So yeah, I mean, it was one of those experiences. I was there for the audition earlier this spring, and I stepped foot onto the campus, into the school, and things just felt right. It felt like it was meant to be. And I know it's maybe a bit cliche, but you don't always feel that.
Yeah.
With all these wonderful schools that I had the opportunity to audition at, this one definitely stood out. So to have it work out was incredible, and yeah, so many wonderful things to look forward to with that.
That is wonderful. I remember getting to see Mr. Doane do a master class at the European String Teachers Association in Oxford. Gosh, this must have been a decade ago or so, but it was very impressive. I mean, of course, that wasn't the first time I'd heard of him, but very effective teacher. I'm just kind of wondering, how did you first run across him?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't have a ton of prior experience, but there was an online summer program that I think is still running and is wonderful. I would definitely recommend it. Its acronym is OSSI. I believe it's the online Summer Solo Strings Institute. Maybe summer isn't one of the S's. I think it's Solo String Institute. But he was one of the guest teachers at that, and it was only a few weeks, so I only got a couple lessons with him. But of those 2 lessons, it was life changing. Truly, I just hadn't been quite that affected by a teacher in a positive way, and I just immediately wanted to try all these things, and the curiosity that I had in response to these lessons was very profound. So that left an impression. And then a few years later, I attended the Bowdoin Festival in Maine. And I didn't work with him. I worked with Professor Ying, but he was there during that time. I got to hear him perform, and truly a phenomenal performer. As phenomenal as he is a teacher, he's also a great performer. So that was also very enticing to see that, he can do both. So yeah, only wonderful things I've heard about him as well. So definitely a top choice going into Eastman, and Eastman boasts so many wonderful faculty. It's not an easy thing, but yeah, he's definitely stood out. So
nice. Now, you yourself have some years under your belt as a cello teacher. What thoughts do you have about kind of your philosophy of cello teaching? Because, sometimes just generally we hear this saying that we tend to teach the way we were taught, but then you end up with a wide variety of students who, need different things and respond to different things. What's your philosophy of teaching so far?
Sure. Yeah. I feel like it's very much still developing in the works. Again, I've been lucky enough to be exposed to such wonderful teachers and pedagogues in the past. So, I feel like I'm able to take away certain elements to sort of use for myself. But I guess in a general philosophy when it comes to teaching, and what I have found to be most effective for my teaching is sort of tailoring the experience to that student, sort of like you were hinting at. I think, especially with beginners, there's so many different people and levels of interest in what they're doing. And I think it's critical to find what exactly makes them excited about playing the cello. With some, they may not be excited at all, but it's important to find specific things. And usually it's as simple as, why did you choose to play the cello? And again, maybe their parents made them play. So this may not apply to everyone, but most of the time they'll maybe have a story or a certain thing that they heard that they were like, I want to play the cello. And I think having that be the foundation for, what you're trying to accomplish with the student, I think is important, because it's very easy to get analytical and to sort of just tell them what needs to be done instead of fueling their excitement for playing. Because I think that's where the learning and the the growth comes, is when, this thing that I did, this work that I put in, got me to a place that I'm really excited about. So if I keep on doing that work, it'll just keep on getting better. So that's what I've found. And again, I'm still trying to figure it out for sure. But yeah, definitely playing into what makes them excited. And also, I struggle with the ratio of talking to playing. It's so easy to get carried away with the talking, because it is a very exciting thing as a teacher to share certain elements of playing, and you want to do it all at once sometimes. But it's also super important to understand that for the student to truly digest and understand a concept, you do have to give it time. and it's very easy to overlook. But I've been working on just allowing them to play and experiment in real time as well. So yeah, those are things that come to mind. But yeah.
Perfect. Well, that's outstanding. Yeah, I mean, it is. You're true. You're exactly right. And I think that balance can change certainly with either the how new a particular topic is, or what phase you are in learning a particular piece, etc. But it is nice to have those times where if a student doesn't understand something, that you take the time to explain it. And other times where if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a sound is worth like 2,000 words, that you're just playing with them, and then you do call and response. And it's funny sometimes how even if when you explain something, they smile and nod and think they're doing it. But when you do that monkey say, monkey do kind of thing, that they go, oh, like that, and they will imitate really well.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great. That's exciting. And yeah, it's great because you also managed to answer the question about motivating too, which is, it's great. It's best in some respects when that motivation question is always baked in from the very get-go about the teaching philosophy as a whole. So what ages have you generally been working with so far, approximately? Or
Yeah, the majority of the students I've had have been elementary school to early high school. I did have one outlier, wonderful outlier, I should say. Very funny story I want to share because I feel like this doesn't happen very often. But really a sweet student that I had a couple summers ago, I believe we were working, and she's one of these kids that are just super involved in everything at school, very smart, athletic, doing all this stuff. So there was a point to where it seemed like cello was taking a backseat and there wasn't time to practice. So, I'd get there every week, and it wasn't quite, you could tell. Sometimes you can tell that, oh, they didn't really touch the cello this past week. And her mom was on her case every week about, if you don't practice this week, then I'm going to start taking your lessons from you. And I always thought that was a joke. I was like, okay, I don't know if that's much of a threat. But I think her deal was at one point, if you don't practice X amount of hours, I'm going to have your lesson next week. I'm going to be the one taking the lesson. And this is the mom. And I was like, all right, I guess we'll see what happens, because she was on pace to be practicing less. She wasn't practicing more. She was going in that direction. And sure enough, the next week, she didn't practice the amount of hours that her mom wanted to. And I arrive at their house, and it's this small chair, half-size cello. I mean, she's very small still. So it's all small, but it's the mom holding the cello when I walk in. And I was speechless. So I sort of felt it out. I didn't know if it was a joke, but sure enough, she took the entire lesson, and she did express that she's always had an interest in playing the cello. So it was a funny way of going from a threat, if you will, to actually a wonderful student who I had more lessons with and enjoyed working with as well. So that by itself was a wonderful learning experience for me as well, teaching someone older than I am. But I think once you get into the teaching world, it's not all that foreign to teach adults, adult beginners specifically.
yeah, and I think especially if you start with what you said first, which is putting yourself in the shoes, the perspective, the context of each individual student.
Right.
Very nice. All right. So your father, Steve Wiest, composes and arranges a bunch. I don't know if he even knows how many total he's created. And so do you find yourself with an interest in arranging and or composing?
Not nearly as much of an interest as him. And I think just talking with him, it's just something that's in his everyday existence, is composing, whether he's writing it down or whether it's just occurring in his mind. And I would say the same thing for playing the cello. That, like, whether I have the cello physically or outside of it, I'm always interacting with it in some way.
Yeah.
So I will say there are elements, compositional elements that I see myself wanting to experiment with. And I think actually one more informal way of composing is improv, and very very common in the jazz world. And my dad has plenty of experience with that, but I've found that to be a fun thing to do when warming up. Is it maybe instead of playing a scale to a drone, setting a drone and doing an improv over that and just kind of seeing what happens. I always like to search for things, and it's always very satisfying and rewarding when you find things that are super cool. So whether it be certain melodies, certain sound worlds, I really enjoy that. And sometimes I open up Muse Score and write some stuff down, and it can be a very enriching experience for any musician. I think no matter how much experience or how skilled you think you are at composing, I think it's a wonderful thing for all musicians.
It is, and a fun challenge. And let's see. So, and you did you mentioned you did an arrangement recently.
Yeah. Loose on the word arrangement, because it technically had already been arranged for a cello quartet whose recordings were on YouTube. And I found that recording, then I tried to find the actual the actual version online and written form, and couldn't find it. So I resorted to basically just transcribing what I heard. And luckily it worked out. But yeah, I would be interested in transposing other tunes. I love the cello quartet timbre as well. So I would be very interested in continuing to write stuff for that ensemble. So yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's great. I mean, talk about a string quartet being able to blend like crazy. But even when it's one instrument, just four cellos, it can just get inside each other's sounds.
Absolutely.
And I do think it does tend to, if you start out thinking, even somebody who thinks they're just going to start out transcribing, kind of the problem, the muddiness problem of a cello quartet, where if you just transcribe them kind of down into the same two octaves, it can get so muddy. So you come up with creative things to either thin out the middle part or find ways to make the lead part stand out without necessarily taking them up above the treble clef or what have you. Yeah, it's fun. It's definitely a lifelong, yet another dimension of fun to cello playing. Yeehaw. So now tell me, summer plans, or, I mean, I know it's on this juncture between undergrad and grad school. I don't know how much you know what you'll be doing this fall, for example, but even just tentative plans for performances or projects that you'd like to do.
Yeah, so I'm actually very excited to share with you that I will be attending Music Academy of the West this summer. It takes place in Santa Barbara, California. Wonderful program. It's just very well-rounded, many fantastic opportunities, and I have the chance to attend this summer. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So Music Academy of the West is open to all instrumentalists. Some summer programs are just strings or just winds, just brass, but this one is open to all, but at the same time is still fairly selective, in the sense that all of the fellows actually do perform in a symphony setting. So that is one element of the festival. There's also wonderful chamber music programs. They have chamber music setting for fellows, so just between the students, and then they also have chamber music for students and faculty side by side. And they also have a more intensive program for people who really want to dive into chamber music, led by the Takash Quartet, who are the quartet and residents here at CU as well. So many wonderful opportunities. They also have a great program for health and wellness that takes place throughout the program. Wonderful resources there. And then, yeah, just a plethora of performing opportunities. So I'm not sure how much of those will be accessible via live stream or online, but either way, I think it's a great program to look into, whether you're interested in visiting to listen or applying. I think I've just heard so many wonderful things. I can't wait to get started. And that occurs from, I believe it's June 10th to August 8th. So that's the majority of your summer right there. Yeah. And yeah, it's a beautiful location as well, right there on the beach. So,
wow, that sounds like a really nice summer. Beautiful location and all the cello you can play.
Absolutely. Yeah, make it much better.
Terrific. Well, and I know in some respects, even if you have a wish list of cello pieces that you want to get to, once you get to a new school this fall, they may say, no, work on this, then work on that. But it's all good. We have such a great repertoire. In some cases, like, okay.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I can't wait to hear that recital from last Saturday. And I don't know which I'm most excited about. Maybe the Poulenc, because that's just such a weird and wild sonata. Yep. But I'm sure I'm going to thoroughly enjoy it all. And Matthew, I tell you, it's just been such fun. I, of course, remember you from very, very little, even though it's that first cello at age 3, and think so highly of both your parents that you mentioned. Carmen is just like you said, just an amazing string educator. We talked about Steve too. So I gotta say, best of luck to you at Eastman and beyond. Who knows where things will take you after that, but I'm sure it's going to be incredibly exciting and rewarding, fulfilling, and incredibly musical. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep that attitude of, having fun on stage above all. Absolutely. And thanks so much for being my guest.
Thank you. Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Really good.
All right. Well, and everybody out there, happy practicing all weekend, and we'll see you this time next week. Take care.